Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight we're going to step into a world that feels strangely familiar and completely foreign at the same time. We're going to ancient Rome, not the Rome of emperors and triumphs, but the Rome of everyday bodies. Sweaty bodies. Dust-covered bodies. Bodies trying, in their own way, to stay clean in a city of over 1 million people, without soap, without modern medicine, and without any understanding of bacteria. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's always incredible to see how far these stories travel, and how many corners of the world ancient Rome still reaches. Now, let's begin. Imagine waking up in Rome, not in a marble palace, but in a narrow apartment, several stories above the street. The air is already warm. The room smells faintly of yesterday's food, damp stone, smoke, and human presence. You didn't sleep alone. You rarely do. Below you, the city is already awake. Footsteps, carts, voices, animals. Rome was loud, crowded, and not particularly clean, at least by modern standards. And yet, the Romans cared deeply about cleanliness. They just understood it differently. In ancient Rome, being clean wasn't about killing germs. It was about removing dirt, balancing the body, and presenting yourself properly to society. Cleanliness was social, it was cultural, it was public, and nowhere was this more visible than in the baths. The Roman bathhouse was not a luxury, it was a routine. For many Romans, bathing happened daily, sometimes even twice a day. Men, women, children, slaves, freedmen, all passed through the baths, though not always together. You didn't bathe alone in silence. You bathed among voices, echoes, splashing water, laughter, arguments, and steam. The bath was not just a place to wash. It was where you met friends, heard gossip, discussed politics, negotiated business, relaxed sore muscles. It was Rome's version of a social network, except it was built from stone, heat, and water. A typical bath visit began not with water, but with oil. Romans did not use soap the way we do. Instead, they coated their skin with olive oil, sometimes plain, sometimes scented. Oil trapped dirt, sweat, and grime. Then came the strigil, a curved metal scraper. With slow, practiced strokes, Romans scraped the oil and dirt off their bodies, letting it fall away in dark, greasy ribbons. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. After scraping, they moved through different rooms. Warm rooms, hot rooms, steam-filled chambers where the air felt thick and heavy. Sweat poured out of the body. Pores opened. The Romans believed this helped rebalance the body's internal fluids, what they called humours. Cold water came last. A plunge into a frigid pool shocked the body awake, sealed the skin, and left you refreshed. You left the baths cleaner than you arrived, smoother, warmer, lighter, and smelling faintly of oil and smoke. But here's the part that often surprises people. The bath water was not always clean. It was reused, shared, flowing in some places, stagnant in others. Hundreds of bodies passed through the same pools, skin cells, sweat, dirt, oils. The Romans didn't worry about this. They didn't know what microbes were. What mattered was the process, not the purity. And when they left the baths, they walked right back into the city, a city filled with animals, open drains, street waste, dust, smoke. Cleanliness in Rome was temporary. It was something you returned to again and again, not something you achieved once. Now, not everyone had access to grand baths. The poorest Romans might bathe less often. They washed at public fountains, rivers, or basins at home. They wiped themselves down with cloths. They scraped dirt away when they could. But even the poor understood the importance of washing. Dirt was uncomfortable. Smell was social. To smell bad was to announce your status, and not in a good way. Clothing too mattered. Romans didn't wash their clothes with soap, they used urine. Yes, urine. Human urine contains ammonia, which breaks down grease and stains. Public urine collection jars stood on Roman streets. People contributed freely. The liquid was then used by professional cleaners, fullers, to wash and treat clothing. Clothes were stomped clean by foot, rinsed, stretched and dried. The smell? Strong. But the results were effective. Even hair care was a daily concern. Romans washed their hair with ash oils and herbal mixtures. They combed constantly. Lice were common. So were fleas. No amount of bathing eliminated them completely. People scratched. They accepted it. Clean did not mean sterile. Now, let's talk about teeth. Romans brushed their teeth, or at least rubbed them. They used powders made from crushed shells, charcoal and herbs. They rinsed their mouths with water and sometimes urine. Again, ammonia. It whitened teeth. It disinfected, though they didn't know why. The practice was unpleasant, but dental care mattered. A clean mouth was a sign of discipline, and yet disease still thrived. Rome was a city of close contact. Crowded housing, shared water sources, public latrines. Latrines were communal rooms, rows of stone seats with holes, no privacy, no toilet paper. Instead, a sponge on a stick, shared, rinsed, reused. Hygienic by Roman standards, risky by modern ones. Water flowed constantly in Rome. Aqueducts brought fresh water into the city. Fountains overflowed, baths drained. This movement helped prevent stagnation, but it didn't eliminate contamination. People drank from lead pipes. They bathed in reused pools. They lived among animals. Disease was inevitable. When illness came, Romans turned to balance, not cures. Doctors believed sickness came from internal imbalance, too much heat, too much cold, too much moisture. Treatment involved diet changes, baths, rest, bloodletting, and herbal remedies. Garlic, honey, wine, vinegar. Some worked, some didn't. Faith filled the gaps. Temples dedicated to healing gods filled the city. People prayed. They left offerings. They slept in sacred spaces, hoping for divine dreams that revealed cures. Cleanliness, ritual, and belief blended together. To be clean was to be orderly. To be orderly was to be healthy. Or so they believed. During plagues, fear spread faster than illness. People fled the city. They burned incense. They avoided baths, believing heat opened the body to disease. Cleanliness became dangerous. Ironically, the very places designed for health became suspect. And yet, Romans kept bathing, kept washing, kept scraping oil from skin. Because cleanliness wasn't just about survival. It was about identity. To be Roman was to care about the body, to maintain it, to present it properly to the world. As night fell, the baths closed. Steam faded, floors cooled. The city returned to dust and shadow. Romans went home cleaner than before, but not clean for long. By morning, the cycle would begin again. Dirt would return. Sweat would return. And so would the baths. In many ways, the Romans were closer to us than we expect. They worried about smell, about appearance, about health. They just worked with the tools they had. Oil, water, stone, routine. And as you rest now, far from ancient streets and steam-filled halls, it's worth remembering. Cleanliness has always been human. The methods change. The desire doesn't. I'll leave you now with a little quiet. A little imagined steam rising into the Roman air, a city settling into night, and the gentle thought that even 2,000 years ago, people were ending their day the same way you are now, trying to feel clean, trying to feel well, trying to rest. As night settled more deeply over the city, Rome did not fall silent. It softened. The sharp edges of the day and the shouting vendors, the clang of tools, the relentless movement, slowly blurred into something quieter. Oil lamps flickered to life in doorways. Shadows stretched along the stone streets. The smell of smoke returned, mixing with dust and cooked food. And even now, even at night, the question of cleanliness remained, because Rome never truly slept, and neither did its problems. For many Romans, the evening was the last chance to feel clean, a final rinse of the hands, a cloth passed over the face, a little oil rubbed into the skin to soothe dryness left by the baths. Water was precious at night. Public fountains still flowed, but fewer people ventured out. Those who did moved cautiously, carrying lamps, aware of uneven stones and darker corners. Cleanliness after sunset was quieter, more private, less about appearance, more about comfort. Inside Roman homes, washing took on a different character. Most apartments, especially for the working poor, had no running water. Instead, water was carried in jars, carefully measured, used sparingly. A basin might be placed near the hearth. Hands were washed before eating, not for hygiene as we understand it, but as ritual. To wash before a meal was to prepare the body properly, to show respect to the food, to signal order in a crowded world. Children were wiped down with cloths dampened in lukewarm water. Faces, necks, hands. Full bathing at home was rare. Too much effort, too much water, too much heat required. The baths existed for a reason. As families settled in for the night, illness lingered like an uninvited guest. Rome was a city where sickness was always nearby. Not dramatic at first, just a cough that lasted too long, a fever that came and went, a stomach that never quite settled. Most Romans lived with chronic discomfort. They expected it. Health was not a permanent state. It was something that shifted daily. Roman medicine did not seek cures the way modern medicine does. Instead, it sought balance. Doctors believed the body was governed by 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Health meant balance. Illness meant imbalance. Too much heat, too much cold, too much moisture, too much dryness. Bathing was medicine, so was sweating, so was resting, so was fasting, and sometimes, so was doing nothing at all. When a Roman fell ill, the first response was often dietary. Cold foods were removed, warm foods introduced. Wine was diluted more heavily, or removed entirely. Garlic appeared often, honey too. Not because Romans knew they killed bacteria, but because they felt right, because tradition said they worked. Doctors were common in Rome, but their skill varied wildly. Some were well-trained, respected and observant. Others were little more than confident guessers. Many Romans distrusted doctors. They feared bloodletting. They feared invasive treatments. They feared making things worse. So illness was often managed at home, with rest, with baths, with prayer. And prayer mattered. Temples dedicated to healing gods dotted the city. Asclepius, god of medicine, was among the most important. People brought offerings, small coins, clay models of body parts, written prayers. They slept in temple spaces, hoping the god would visit them in dreams. Dreams were diagnostic. A god might suggest a remedy, a diet, a bath, a sacrifice. Healing, for Romans, was both physical and spiritual. Cleanliness crossed that boundary. During times of widespread disease, the city changed. People avoided crowds. Bathhouses emptied, not from fear of dirt, but fear of heat. There was a belief that warmth opened the body, making it vulnerable. Cold baths became safer, Sweating became dangerous. Cleanliness adapted. Even deeply held routines could shift under fear. Public spaces felt different during outbreaks. Markets thinned, temples filled, doctors became more visible and more suspect. And yet, Rome endured, because Rome had always endured illness. Death was not distant in Roman life, it was familiar. Children died young, adults died suddenly. Old age was not guaranteed. Cleanliness in this context was about dignity. The dead were washed, oiled, prepared carefully. Even in death, the body mattered. To clean a body was an act of respect, not for health, but for memory. As days passed, Romans returned again and again to the baths, not because they believed baths made them immortal, but because baths made life more bearable. They soothed aches, eased stiffness, provided routine. They offered a sense of control in a city that rarely offered certainty. Late at night, when lamps burned low and streets emptied, the baths rested. Pools cooled, steam faded. The city breathed. And somewhere, in a small apartment, someone wiped their hands one last time before sleep. Not clean by modern standards, but clean enough. Cleanliness in Rome was never perfect. It was repetitive, temporary, always undone by the next day. But that was the point. To be Roman was not to eliminate dirt. It was to manage it, to scrape it away, to wash it off, to begin again. And as you rest now far removed from stone streets and shared baths, it's worth remembering the desire to feel clean, to feel balanced, to feel at ease in one's body. That desire is ancient, older than medicine, older than science, older than Rome itself. And that desire did not end when the baths closed or the lamps dimmed. It followed Romans into sleep, because night in Rome was not a clean thing. When a Roman lay down to rest, cleanliness was already slipping away. Dust from the street clung to skin. Smoke from the hearth settled into hair and cloth. The body, freshly scraped and oiled hours earlier, was already producing sweat again. Sleep did not pause the body's work. Romans understood this instinctively. They did not expect to wake clean. They expected to wake used. Beds were simple. In poorer homes they were little more than wooden frames or mats laid on the floor, stuffed with straw or rags. In wealthier homes, mattresses might be filled with wool or feathers. But regardless of status, beds absorbed everything. Sweat oil, dust, skin. Sheets were rarely washed. Instead, they were aired, hung out when possible, beaten, shaken. Cleanliness here was about exposure, not elimination. Many Romans slept lightly. The city was never fully quiet. Footsteps echoed, animals moved, someone coughed nearby. Water ran through pipes or channels. At night, smells intensified. Without sunlight, the city's waste revealed itself more fully. Rotting food, animal dung, open drains. Romans breathed it in as they slept. And still, they slept. This constant exposure shaped how Romans thought about disease. Illness did not feel like an invasion. It felt like a condition of living. The question was not if the body would suffer, but how much. Children, especially, lived in a fragile state. Infant mortality was high. Fevers took them quickly. Parents learned not to panic at every symptom. They watched, waited, balanced concern with resignation. A child who survived early years was considered strong. Cleanliness helped, but it was not a guarantee. Roman mothers were often the first healers. They knew which baths soothed cramps, which oils calmed skin, which foods helped digestion. This knowledge was practical, inherited, informal, not written in books, passed through observation and repetition. Men too developed bodily awareness, Soldiers bathed to soothe wounds and stiffness. Labourers washed to remove grime that irritated skin. Sweat was normal. Pain was normal. Cleanliness was maintenance, not perfection. Public bathhouses reinforced this mindset. They were not sanitized spaces, they were controlled environments. Stone floors could be scrubbed, water could be drained and replaced, heat could be regulated. This was not cleanliness as purity, it was cleanliness as management. Disease challenged this system. When plague struck, familiar routines failed. Baths became suspect. Crowds became dangerous. Touch, once social, became risky. Romans responded by withdrawing, not by sterilizing. They reduced contact. They prayed more. They burned incense. They altered habits slowly, cautiously. Medical writers argued endlessly. Some insisted baths were essential. Others warned they weakened the body. There was no consensus, only debate. Cleanliness became political, cultural, philosophical. Wealth shaped survival. The rich could leave the city. The poor could not. The poor bathed less during outbreaks, not from ignorance, but necessity. The baths closed or became unsafe. Water access shrank. Cleanliness adapted downward. Even so, Romans did not abandon the idea of care. They still washed hands, still wiped faces, still oiled skin when possible. These small acts mattered psychologically. They restored a sense of order. Order mattered deeply to Romans. The body was a microcosm of the state. To care for the body was to honour Roman identity. Filth was associated with chaos, with barbarism, with decline. Even when reality contradicted this ideal, the ideal remained powerful. As centuries passed, these habits evolved. Bathhouses fell into disrepair. Water systems weakened. But the Roman obsession with bodily care did not disappear overnight. It transformed, it adapted, it lingered. Later, cultures would inherit Roman ideas imperfectly. Bathing would rise and fall. Fear of water would return in new forms. But the Roman experiment, public, routine, social cleanliness, left a deep imprint. And now, far removed from strigils and steam, we still echo their instincts. We wash to feel right. We clean to reset. We bathe not just to remove dirt, but to restore ourselves. Rome did not understand germs, but it understood something else, that the body, when neglected, becomes a burden, and when cared for, even imperfectly, becomes livable. This is where we pause. Not because the story is finished, but because, like the Romans, we end one cycle and begin another. As the city moved through its days, Romans became deeply familiar with the limits of cleanliness. They learned through experience rather than theory that no amount of bathing could fully separate the body from its environment. Rome pressed in on the skin. Dust clung to sandals. Sweat returned within hours. Smoke settled into hair and cloth. Cleanliness was always temporary. And so, Romans adjusted their expectations. For many, the baths were not about erasing dirt, but about resetting the body. A way to begin again. A labourer might enter the baths exhausted, muscles tight, skin grimy from work. He would leave not spotless, but loosened, restored enough to face the next day. This mattered more than perfection. Romans spoke often of feeling heavy or blocked when unclean. Bathing was believed to open the body, to let internal pressures escape, to restore flow. In this way, hygiene blended with philosophy. The body was not a sealed object, it was porous, always exchanging matter with the world. This belief shaped Roman attitudes towards sweat. Sweat was not shameful, it was necessary. It meant the body was functioning. To sweat in the baths was considered healthy, even virtuous. Too little sweat was dangerous. It meant the body was stagnant. Cleanliness then was dynamic. Too much bathing weakened you. Too little hardened you. Balance was everything. This balancing act extended to children. Children were not bathed as frequently as adults. Their bodies were considered delicate. Too much heat could harm them. Too much cold could shock them. Mothers learned by watching a child's skin, a child's appetite, a child's sleep. Cleanliness followed these signals, not rules. As children grew, their exposure increased. They ran through streets barefoot. They played near fountains. They touched animals. Illness was common, but survival bred resilience. A child who lived past early childhood was considered toughened, seasoned by the city. The elderly experienced cleanliness differently. Older Romans bathed more carefully. They avoided extremes of temperature. They preferred warm rooms over hot ones, gentle scraping, light oiling. Their skin was thinner, their bodies slower to recover. Cleanliness became maintenance rather than renewal. Gender shaped hygiene as well. Men bathed publicly and openly. Women's bathing was more varied. Some used public baths at different hours. Others bathed at home. Modesty mattered, but practicality mattered more. Roman women cared deeply about skin. Oils, perfumes, and creams were common. Smooth skin signaled health, fertility, and status. Cosmetics blurred the line between hygiene and appearance. White powders brightened faces. Oils gave skin sheen. Scents masked unpleasant odours, not because Romans were ignorant of smell, but because they lived with it constantly. Smell carried meaning. The scent of oil suggested refinement. The scent of sweat suggested labour. The scent of decay suggested danger. Disease often announced itself through smell. Infected wounds smelled. Illness altered breath. Physicians paid attention to this. Smell was diagnostic. A sweet breath was ominous. A foul wound meant corruption inside the body. Cleanliness could delay these signs, but not always prevent them. Roman doctors worked with limited tools. They observed, they touched, they smelled. They asked questions. They relied on experience rather than instruments. Cleanliness was part of treatment, but never the whole. In times of extended illness, bathing was reduced. Too much washing weakened the body. Patients were wiped gently instead. Warm cloths, oil rubbed into joints. The goal was comfort. Comfort mattered because recovery was uncertain. Many illnesses resolved on their own. Others did not. Romans accepted this uncertainty. They did not expect medicine to save everyone. They expected it to help some. This acceptance shaped Roman resilience. They did not see disease as failure. It was part of life in a crowded world. Cleanliness improved odds, but fate still ruled. During large outbreaks, Rome's system strained. Water supply remained constant, but access changed. Public spaces emptied. Private care increased. Households became isolation units. Cleanliness became inward, less social, more cautious. Yet even then, Romans resisted total withdrawal. Baths reopened quickly after crises. Crowds returned, because social life mattered as much as health. Isolation was dangerous too, emotionally, politically. Over centuries, Roman hygiene created expectations. Visitors from outside Rome commented on baths, on fountains, on the obsession with washing. Romans considered this civilization. Others considered it excess. When Rome declined, the loss of bathing shocked contemporaries. Stone structures crumbled. Water stopped flowing. Public cleanliness disappeared. People noticed. They missed it. It was remembered as progress lost. But even without grand baths, Roman habits lingered. Small washings, oiling skin, caring for appearance. The idea that the body required attention did not vanish, and now, far removed from aqueducts and steam, we still follow similar rhythms. Morning washing, evening cleansing, moments of reset. Not because we fully understand our bodies, but because we feel better afterward. The Romans would recognize that feeling, that quiet relief after washing, that sense of being restored enough, not perfect, but ready. This is where we pause again, not because the story ends, but because Roman life itself moved in cycles. Clean, dirty, clean again, always temporary, always human. As Roman life continued, cleanliness became something people learned to negotiate, not master. Every day brought small decisions, whether to bathe now or later, whether to scrape oil thoroughly or lightly, whether to endure discomfort or conserve strength. Cleanliness required effort, and effort was never unlimited. Work shaped the body before any bath could undo it. Labourers returned home coated in dust, lime, grain chaff, or metal filings. Their skin hardened over time. Calluses formed. Bathing softened these surfaces, but only temporarily. A man who worked with his hands understood this cycle intimately. Clean, dirty, clean again. There was no end point. Roman soldiers experienced hygiene differently. On campaign, baths disappeared. Water was scarce. Cleaning became improvised. Soldiers wiped down with cloths, scraped skin dry, rinsed wounds carefully. Disease spread quickly in camps. Cleanliness was survival. Off-duty, soldiers bathed obsessively. They soaked sore muscles. They scraped away weeks of grime. The baths became a reward, a return to civilization. Roman writers often contrasted clean Romans with dirty outsiders. Barbarians were described as unwashed, smelly, disordered. These descriptions were not always accurate, but they mattered symbolically. Cleanliness equaled control. To wash was to impose order on chaos. This belief extended to public architecture. Baths were massive, stone-heavy, permanent. They announced Rome's values in physical form. Water flowed because Rome commanded it to. Heat existed because Rome engineered it. Clean bodies were proof of empire. Inside the baths, hierarchy softened. Rich and poor shared space. Status mattered less, though it never vanished entirely. Bodies equalized people. Sweat did not discriminate. Dirt made everyone similar. This shared vulnerability created social glue. Conversation flowed easily in the baths. People talked while scraping, while soaking, while resting between rooms. This constant contact normalized bodies. Scars were visible. Illness marks were seen. A limp was known. Health was not hidden. This visibility shaped empathy. Romans were not squeamish. They saw sickness daily. They understood frailty. Cleanliness was not denial of this. It was response to it. As people aged, their relationship with bathing shifted again. Older Romans avoided extremes. They bathed shorter. They scraped gently. They oiled more. They listened to their bodies closely. Pain guided hygiene choices. The very old sometimes stopped bathing entirely, not from neglect, but from risk. Slipping, chilling, overexertion. Instead, they were cleaned by others. Washed carefully. Tended. Cleanliness became communal. Caregiving created intimacy. A son washing a father's hands. A wife wiping a husband's face. A slave caring for an aging master. These acts carried dignity. To be cleaned by another was vulnerable, but accepted. Slaves, too, experienced cleanliness uniquely. Their bodies laboured constantly. They bathed when permitted, often less frequently. But even slaves understood cleanliness as relief. Bathing eased pain. It restored enough energy to continue. Roman household manuals advised masters to keep slaves reasonably clean, not from kindness alone, but practicality. Clean bodies worked better, lasted longer. Disease in slaves threatened households. Cleanliness became economic. Children learned hygiene early, not through rules, but imitation. They watched adults scrape oil, wash hands, prepare water. Cleanliness was absorbed through repetition. There were no moral lectures about dirt, only consequences. Skin irritation, illness, social discomfort. Children learned quickly. Roman streets reinforced hygiene habits. Fountains encouraged washing. Public water normalized contact. People rinsed hands casually, splashed faces. Cleanliness existed in small moments. Yet the streets themselves resisted cleanliness. Animals passed through constantly. Horses, mules, dogs. Waste accumulated. Water washed some away, but never all. Rome cleaned itself imperfectly. This imperfection shaped Roman tolerance. They accepted a baseline level of filth. They worked above it, not below. During summer, hygiene intensified. Heat increased sweat. Smell intensified. Baths grew crowded. People bathed more often. Cleanliness adapted seasonally. Winter changed habits again. Cold discouraged bathing. Water chilled the body. People washed less frequently. Scraping replaced soaking. Oil replaced water. Cleanliness shifted inward. Illness followed seasons. Summer brought stomach ailments. Winter brought respiratory illness. Romans noticed patterns. They adjusted habits accordingly, not scientifically, but observantly. Roman medicine was experiential. Doctors trusted what they saw repeatedly. What worked sometimes became tradition. What failed quietly faded. Cleanliness practices evolved slowly. Despite limits, Roman hygiene extended life, not dramatically, but measurably. Those who bathed regularly suffered fewer skin infections, wounds healed better. Comfort improved, quality of life mattered. This focus on comfort distinguished Roman thinking. They did not pursue health for longevity alone. They pursued livability, a body that felt manageable, a body that functioned day to day. And when the body failed, as it often did, cleanliness offered solace. A warm cloth, a light oil, a familiar ritual. These did not cure disease, but they reduced suffering. As evening returned once more, Romans repeated familiar acts. Hands washed, faces wiped, feet rinsed, oil applied. Cleanliness closed the day gently. Sleep followed, not pristine, not sterile, but sufficient. Centuries later, we judge Roman hygiene by modern standards. We see shared sponges, reused bathwater, lead pipes. We recoil. But Romans judged hygiene by lived experience, by relief, by comfort, by ritual. They were not ignorant. They were practical. They worked with what they had. Cleanliness for Romans was never an illusion of control over nature. It was a collaboration with it. Water flowed, bodies changed, disease came and went, life continued, and now, as you rest, you are participating in the same ancient rhythm, cleansing, settling, preparing for sleep, not to defeat the world, but to face it again tomorrow. This is where we pause once more. The story continues, but the night deepens, and rest becomes the most important medicine of all. As the night wore on, Rome settled into a quieter rhythm, but the body never truly rested from its negotiations with the world. Even in sleep, Romans believed the body continued its internal work, digesting, sweating, rebalancing. Sleep was not passive, it was active recovery. Many Romans believed that the way one slept affected health just as much as food or bathing. Sleeping too warmly trapped harmful vapours inside the body. Sleeping too cold tightened the flesh and restricted circulation. Bedding mattered, so did position. Some preferred to sleep elevated, believing it helped breathing. Others slept closer to the ground, feeling steadier there. Cleanliness extended into these choices. Morning often began before sunrise. The body woke stiff. Skin felt tight. Oil from the night before had absorbed into cloth and straw. The first act of the day was rarely a full wash. Instead, Romans wiped, hands first, face next, eyes carefully. This small ritual marked the transition from sleep to wakefulness. Water was cold in the morning. Even in summer, fountains ran cool. People splashed lightly. Too much shock was dangerous. Cleanliness was gradual. As the city woke, so did its smells. Cooking fires ignited. Animals stirred. Streets filled. Dust rose. Cleanliness faded almost immediately. This did not frustrate Romans. It was expected. The morning wash was symbolic, a resetting of intention rather than a guarantee of purity. Illness often announced itself early in the day, a headache upon waking, a heaviness in the limbs, a dryness in the mouth. Romans took these signs seriously. They delayed bathing. They adjusted diet. They conserved strength. Cleanliness adapted to condition. Those who felt well bathed eagerly. Those who felt weak bathed cautiously. Those who felt ill often avoided baths entirely. The baths were powerful, but power could harm as easily as heal. Roman physicians advised moderation constantly, not because they knew the body perfectly, but because extremes were visibly dangerous. People fainted in hot rooms, collapsed in cold water. Cleanliness had limits. This awareness made Roman hygiene remarkably flexible. There was no single rule, no universal schedule, only guidelines shaped by age, health, season, and labor. Public bathhouses reflected this flexibility. Rooms varied in temperature. Paths through the baths were not fixed. People lingered where they felt comfortable, left when they felt strained. The body guided the ritual. Between rooms, Romans rested, sat quietly, listened to water. These pauses mattered. Cleanliness was not rushed. It unfolded. Outside the baths, city life resumed. Clean bodies re-entered dirty spaces. Romans did not resent this. They accepted it as the rhythm of urban life. Disease, however, disrupted rhythms, not dramatically at first. Subtle changes. A neighbour absent from the baths, a friend avoiding crowds, a physician making more house calls. Cleanliness shifted quietly. People bathed at home more, used less water, scraped more, touched fewer surfaces. They adapted without panic. Rome was used to illness. During longer outbreaks, fear accumulated slowly. Not hysteria, fatigue. People tired of uncertainty. Cleanliness became comfort, a way to assert normalcy. In these times, small acts mattered. Washing hands before meals, cleaning wounds carefully, air in bedding, burning incense. These acts provided structure. Roman homes smelled strongly during illness. Herbs, smoke, vinegar. Scents masked decay. They also reassured the living. Smell meant action. Physicians visited frequently during such periods. They observed households carefully. Cleanliness told stories. Unwashed skin suggested neglect or despair. Order suggested resilience. Even the arrangement of objects mattered. Basins placed nearby. Cloths folded. Oil within reach. These were signs of preparedness. When illness ended, whether through recovery or death, households cleaned thoroughly. Not to remove contagion, but to mark transition. Floors swept, bedding aired, basins scrubbed. Cleanliness closed the chapter. grief and hygiene intertwined. Washing after loss was grounding. It reintroduced routine. It restored movement. Romans believed that disorder invited misfortune. Cleanliness pushed back against it. As weeks passed, life normalized. Bathhouses filled again. Crowds returned. Laughter resumed. The city absorbed illness and moved on. This resilience was not accidental. It was practiced through repetition, through routine, through habits built over generations. Roman hygiene was never about fear of dirt alone. It was about continuity, keeping life moving, maintaining balance. Over centuries, these practices shaped Roman identity deeply. To bathe was to belong. To care for the body was to affirm civilization. When later societies abandoned large-scale bathing, they did not abandon cleanliness entirely. They reinterpreted it, but Rome's legacy lingered in language, in ritual, in instinct. We still feel it when we wash to reset, when we bathe after exhaustion, when we clean not because we must, but because it helps us continue. The Romans would understand that impulse. They lived by it. And now, as you rest, you are part of the same ancient exchange. Body and world, clean and unclean, balance and imbalance. The city fades again. Water slows, oil lamps dim, and cleanliness, always temporary, yields once more to sleep.